All right, guys. I remember Cliff High talked about the oil spill. Remember that happened a couple years ago. Or was it? Was that also in 20? I think that was 2010, or whatever. And he said that oil, because they drilled so deep, and he said the way they're reading the data out of the WebBot report was that it would last like 19 months or something like that, and that it would somehow, maybe an earthquake or something would happen later and finally close it off for good or whatever. It almost seems like that was backwards, where 19 months to 2 years later, whatever. Because if you remember, oh God, what was that guy's name? He actually was a kind of, not really an elitist, but he'd been to the CFR. He had spoken there. I did videos on it at the time for sure. Man, I can't think of his name, but he was out there saying, look, I don't know why they're showing you these videos of the BP submarine video thing. They're going around trying to put this, this spewing oil down there to fix it or whatever. Why are they even showing that? The major damage is miles from there. And there are news people like, what? Miles from there? What do you mean? He's like, yeah, it's all cracked underneath there. It's the major blowouts miles from there. That's just like something to show people. I don't know why they're doing that. Long story short, he drowned in his jacuzzi after being out on the news media a few times. He had drowned in his jacuzzi. If what he was saying was a lie, he wouldn't have been killed. Because he didn't drown in a jacuzzi. Nobody does. I almost feel like the name's on the tip of my tongue, but I cannot think of it. And anyways, they dealt with him and shut him up pretty quick. So the WebBot said, this thing's going to have a problem, and finally maybe an earthquake or something. It looks like in the data is showing that it'll be finally sealed off for good. Now it's interesting because it gave the time frame of around 2 years later. And that's around now, basically. And if that's the case, I'm reading this thing about this massive sinkhole in Parish, whatever, Louisiana. I haven't done a video really on it yet, but I've been watching it. And this thing is like expanding. Natural gas is shooting out of it. Oil's now coming out of it. Crude oil. And I thought to myself, if this guy's talking about how this major crack, even Lindsey Williams talked about it, that there's this major crack down there underneath the earth, and this massive high pressure oil is trying to get out, it's finding its way out elsewhere. And perhaps it is shot through the cracks way down there, miles and miles away, up into this area, and that's why this sinkhole is what it is, and that's also why crude oil is coming out with it. This is just a possibility. I'm not saying that I know this to be fact, but it says here from the Louisiana.gov website, news release, for immediate release, this was Thursday, October 11th, 2012, Phyllis Darinsboro, whatever, Office of Conservation orders Texas brine to assess and abate natural gas in Bayou Corn area. Order draws from scientific evidence that shows Texas brine cavern failure led to crude oil and natural gas reaching the surface. Welsh noted that based on fingerprint analysis and other data, the source of the crude oil and natural gas that have been observed at the surface in the Bayou Corn area appears to be one or more naturally occurring and natural gas formations, and that the preponderance of scientific evidence indicates that the failure of the sidewall of the Texas brine cavern provided a pathway up to the aquifer and the surface for oil and natural gas that had previously been confined thousands of feet below. Now that last sentence may bother you a little bit, and it should. Indicate the failure of the sidewall of the Texas brine cavern provided a pathway up to the aquifer and the surface for oil and natural gas that had previously been confined thousands of feet below. So they've drilled through dirt, right, down to the aquifer, water, drinking water, past that, deeper into the earth to get this nice set of oil. Deep oil. Oh, sweet stuff. Love that sweet stuff. Love me some sweet stuff. And it's blowing through all of that and going to the top of the surface. So that means it's below the water table, or the aquifer is where the oil is. That's where they got it. It is obviously spewed into the aquifer and above it through to the top of the surface, where we human beings are witnessing it live with our own eyes. And along with it, natural gas. It's very interesting because when you've been reading these WebBot reports for so long like I have, and there's all these things in here. Now keep in mind, you might say, oh, well, the wars and the Iran, man, that's a lucky guess, if anything, because that's always been an issue. We've always heard about it, blah, blah, blah. A coming world war, well, that's going to be obvious. There's always a big war sooner or later, blah, blah, blah. But this thing got into detail of every aspect of our lives and of our planet, and talked about catastrophes, both man-made and Mother Earth, etc. Very specific on those words. Both man-made catastrophes and Earth-created, natural. And it even gave that example of this oil problem in the Gulf, meaning ahead or something in around 19 months or 2 years later. Something like that. I'm not actually looking at it. I just remember it in my head. It isn't being solved 19 months later. It appears to be showing its head worse 19 months or 2 years later, whatever you want to call it. And again, the timing, I don't care about the timing. The WebBot is not perfect on the timing. Sometimes it's dead on, other times it's not. If it was not true when the timing was off, then I'd be like, oh, whew, thank God. But that's not the case, because when things go by and they miss them, they seem to come back later with a little ferocious appetite. So what is to come of this? I don't know. But if I'm reading this right, and this came from the Louisiana.gov website, this isn't some blog. www.dnr.louisiana.gov for immediate release, October 11th. This is telling me oil is going into the aquifer. And how many aquifers, I don't know, but how many aquifers lead to other aquifers and daisy chain and that kind of thing? Don't know. No one's really explored an aquifer, right? We just drill into them and take the water out. And strangely enough, there's been some language in the some of the WebBot reports that talk about just such a kind of thing occurring, where it kind of pollutes other areas, aquifers. It was specific to the word aquifers being polluted in the report that was right after Fukushima, the WebBot report. Or it may have actually been prior to Fukushima, because it was after the oil spill, and it was in total relation to that, but I think it may have been after Fukushima. Just don't quote me because I'm not 100% sure. Matter of fact, you know how I do this sometimes. If you are willing to just wait a second, let me see if I can find any kind of information, because I do have some of these old reports. See, that's October of 2010. I'm going to start from 8/16/2010, that report, and just see if the word aquifer is in there. So just bear with me while I do this quick search. It's not on that one. Next. Nope. Next. Yes. It is in the one, at least the date on this one was January 25th, 2011. First, I don't even know what it's going to say. This is, I'm going to, let me go ahead and read this. This is from January, what did I say, 25th? 2011 is the date of this file, this WebBot report. So let me go ahead and just read this a little bit. The data sets are filling with supporting sets that go to the idea of pan-planetary earthquakes. These descriptors appearing in support for the pan-planetary impact earthquakes are piling up under cracking. And by the way, it could be an earthquake underground, whatever, that caused this thing in Louisiana. I'm not saying it's the Gulf oil spill for sure. I'm just reminding you of some things that happened around that time, etc. Supporting sets that go to the idea of pan-planetary earthquakes. These descriptors appearing in support of the pan-planetary impact earthquakes are piling up under cracking and tearing of ground and sharp separations of landforms. There are the largest growth and aspect attributes of the data set in support of the damage and destruction of infrastructure. The accretion patterns are showing that international in sense of cross-border damage problems will appear to due to the earthquake damage. There are areas describing cross-border rentals of lands for refugees that will come about due to the spreading problems related to water and transportation that are caused by pan-planetary earthquakes. The data is not specifically saying that any given earthquake will be more devastating than any other earthquake this year, but the idea of yet another year of lots of big earthquakes as was 2010. And keep in mind, this was January. We had the big earthquake in March, 2 months later after this report. And as it said, this year will be a year of another lots of big earthquakes. Now, there wasn't a lot of them. There was one massive one, though, 2011. Other issues rising from the earthquakes of 2011, and again, I'm telling you now, when you hear these dates, well, we're in 2012. You better forget the dates and listen to what it's saying. Because as I've said, those dates are not always right. But the data appears to be right. It's just a matter of how soon. And it will be sooner than any of us likes, I can assure you. Other issues rising from earthquakes of 2011 and beyond will include the bump of new lands with current habitation. Further, the earthquakes will include the disruption of waterway man-made. That will also cause transportation dysfunction. The earthquake subset within the Terra entity, or that data set within the Earth or whatever Terra entity, also has large numbers of crosslinks to the populous US of A entity, where the particular subsets of termination are themselves cross-linked. Termination in the data, not like killing people, not the Terminator, are themselves cross-linked over to the outer space entity, where they terminate in the secret government / hidden civilization subsets. There are very prominent subsets in support of the hidden civilization that go to revealed mass problems that afflict the access points to which the population of the USA will be forced due to the earthquakes causing water, including underground aquifers, changes, and thus severe further climate change. The Terra entity is also forecasting that fires, he says, in Europe, Southern Europe, will cause weather problems for areas to the east, including 2 large cities which will be hosting celebrations at the time, in spite of the smoke pollution. The linguistics around the smoke from the hillside fires also cross-linked over to the outer space data entity, where the termination points are new space technology. This cross-link chain seems to be suggesting that somehow the smoke pollution will cause problems for humans in the 2 cities and the secret space program somehow. Not sure. Further problems from the Terra entity forecast includes rather large distortions in economic flows both within nations and international. These earthquakes are apparently going to impact the infrastructure that allows for international currency flows. You mean like the exchanges in Wall Street? The good news, oddly associated with the infrastructure damaging earthquakes, is that secrets will be revealed by the exposures of old dirt by the shaking hills. The earthquakes that will be causing the transportation problems and the subsequent global economic distortions are also temporally linked to cloudiness that will be planetary in its effect and or scope. The cloudiness sub-descriptor set is a curious set in that it is apparently not associated with the atmospheric river nor the flooding, but rather seems to be a new form of weather / climate that includes prodigious cloud formations. Let me try to search for more of that word aquifer. No, there's no more words of aquifer in that report. So let me go to the next report, which was June 15th, 2011, and just see if anything's in there. Nope. That may have been the only one. That's 2010. No. everything there. I'm going back a little further, but I'm going to go forward too. Here we go. This one, May 25th, 5/25/2010. Let me. This may be the oil one. Gulf region. Subsets of aspect, attributes, and support for the military language coming to the forefront of the mainstream media indicate that several interesting forms of diaspora, which is fleeing of people, leaving of people, will also affect the military within the Gulf state regions. As the environment degrades across the entire Gulf state region, and ultimately the southeastern seaboard states, the USA military will be in the position of having to relocate actual hundreds of thousands of shipments of material, all kinds of crap that humans accumulate thinking they need stuff. Oh, and armaments too, as well as hundreds of thousands of humans. This is indicated to dramatically affect the USA military both in preparations for warfare and morale. Bearing in mind that the diaspora is indicated to remove wealth in many forms, such as wastage and otherwise needless shipments of humans and goods, as well as the crushing of fixed property values in the affected regions. The military and its individual employees will also suffer economic loss at an unheard of level. This component of the devaluation of the dollar, as well as destruction of resources, is indicated to rise to visibility in the mainstream media over summer, primarily from July 18th onward of 2010. I don't recall hearing or seeing that, so I'll just throw this information away. But wait a minute. I told you to forget about the dates because this thing can be way off on the date sometimes. So let's go to the next section right under this. Other forms of destruction/degradation of human and animal/plants habitat in the southeastern, that would be Louisiana, of USA and throughout the Gulf of Mexico are indicated to come from potable water aquifer contamination. The actual keyword in the webbot, which are always in brackets, that he is interpreting and adding sentences, to make it make sense. The actual keyword. I'm going to do this when it comes up for fun, okay? Other forms of destruction/degradation of human and animal plants habitat in the southeastern USA and throughout the Gulf of Mexico are indicated to come from potable water aquifer contamination. This is indicated to come from both air and salt water intrusion forms of pollution. The data accretion patterns are indicating that the contamination of drinking water will be one of the first acknowledged permanent problems, as well as being one of the first of the cited reasons for local diaspora. Wow. Oh, but that said 2010. I'm not even going to pay attention. Not even going to pay attention. I don't care. You don't care now. Except there is a little sinkhole problem in Louisiana, a Gulf state in the southeast that is experiencing oil and natural gas spewing out of the thing. They've drilled through an aquifer to get to the gas, and it's now leaking around the sides or whatever. Not the gas, but the oil and the gas, I guess. The natural gas. And it is now, as this thing says, let me read it. Order draws from scientific evidence that show, this is from the press release, Louisiana, shows that Texas brine cavern failure. So we have a brine, and I don't know if this is what that brine word means, but you remember the old, when you were a kid, sometimes they brought these little brine shrimp, and you grew them in a little pot or something, and a little thing in your classroom. Oh, brine shrimp, we're going to feed them and grow them and let them live. Brine as in salt water. So is that what is a Texas brine cavern some kind of salt dome, salt such and such cavern? Because if it is, that last statement I just said on the WebBot report about saltwater intrusion, oh my God, is that a hit? But the timing was off. Sorry about that. Welsh noted that, again, this is from Louisiana. Welsh noted that based on fingerprint analysis and other data, the source of the crude oil and natural gas that have been observed at the surface, the bayou appears to be one or more naturally occurring oil and natural gas formations, and that the preponderance of scientific evidence indicates that the failure of the sidewall of the Texas brine cavern provided a pathway up to the aquifer and then to the surface for oil and natural gas that had previously been confined thousands of feet below. Now, you and I know it doesn't take thousands of feet for someone to drill down into an aquifer and suck water out of it. It doesn't. But it does take thousands and thousands to dig way down in these wells and get some nice primo oil. So this, I'm going to classify it right now. JSNP4 is classifying this as an absolute positive WebBot hit. More crap coming to a planet near you.